Hey everybody, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and this is the fifth and final installment of an ongoing video series I've been doing with my friend Dr. Jeremy Holmes. I'm a Protestant, he's a Catholic, theologian, professor, Bible guy, and we thought it would be fun to sit down and talk about all the things that theoretically would come up if you could just say whatever you wanted in a Catholic Protestant conversation. So we went to a bar in the town where I used to live, where he still lives. That's Lander, Wyoming, and we got some food and we sat and talked for ever. It was a very long, wide-ranging conversation, and I'm super happy with how it went. I learned a lot. It made me more empathetic. I felt like we had some great give and take, and I hope that you're enjoying it as well. Speaking of enjoying it, I know that some of you are deeply concerned that we might not have been properly nourished because we ordered food and then we kind of picked at it real slowly. Well, the reason for that, most of all, the slow picking that is because the conversation was just really interesting. The other reason is because I edit my videos. And I edited my videos so that every time someone was crunching a waffle fry, you wouldn't have to hear it because these things really pick up waffle fries. It's incredible. So we ate enough and we ate some more afterwards and it was awesome. And this is the last installment. I hope you enjoy it, even though it's about a pretty touchy topic. This last conversation is about church and state. It's about violence on the part of the church. And I know there are a billion reasons that I can think of for why somebody on the internet watching this video would get their hackles up before we even get into the conversation. But I hope you'll hear us out on it and listen to the give and take. This just isn't the kind of thing that you can neatly and tidily make go away. The reality is that Christendom is something that for a long period of time wielded the sword, primarily the Catholic Church. And at times that sword got pretty bloody. I think it's a pretty reasonable question for an outsider to look at that and say, well, it doesn't seem like the Catholic Church is killing people or swinging the sword anymore, which is awesome. So understanding that the past can be complicated and tricky, where are we at now? And so the question I asked Dr. Holmes was, has something changed theologically within Catholicism as it pertains to the question of violence? Or is it just that that's not how culture works anymore and no church could wield such authority anymore, so it becomes irrelevant? Put another way, if the Catholic Church were back in a position of authority and leadership, would it still wield the sword the way it has in the past? Or is there a new theological mechanism and some change of values that would cause that to play out differently? It's a very difficult question. It was very gracious of Dr. Holmes to hear me on that and to bounce it back and forth, and I think the conversation is fruitful. We'll bounce over to that, and then we'll just let our conversation wrap up as it wraps up, and I'll see you around the internet or on another one of these videos down the road. All right, let's get to it. I don't know any Catholic that I've ever met in my entire life who advocates for violence toward people who think the wrong thoughts. Mm-hmm. And my question is there a theological mechanism that changed, or was it just kind of a coming around to, yikes, that was not our best look, we're not doing that anymore?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Two things. One would be a basic change in, I'm not prepared to say doctrine, but to say instinct about how the church relates to the state, you could say, or I guess I would prefer just to say to the secular world. By secular, I just mean the non-church, like non-clergy people doing their thing out there, where you have your local city council, you've got your club, that whole realm. How does the church relate to that? That is to say, can you have, for example, a Catholic nation, like a nation where, as a nation, we're Catholic? If you can't have that, if you've arrived at the view that that's actually impossible and wrong, then you're going to draw one set of conclusions. But if you think that's possible, then the Catholic faith actually becomes part of the common good of a nation. And then you would see someone who threatens the Catholicity of this nation, similar to the way you would see someone who threatens their military safety or their economic well-being, that this is a threat to the country. And so it's not just the same as if, like, we do not live in a officially even Christian nation. right? And so two Christians disagree, it's just kind of between them. Or this church disagrees with this guy, it's kind of between these people and that guy. But if you have the lens, if you can put on the lens for a minute of, wait a minute, what if I were to think of the country itself as officially this religion, then you would see it a heretical teaching, especially one that's catching on, as a threat to the national well-being, and there might be a national response to that would look different from the way instincts tend to break these days. So I think a shift in the instinct about how church relates to, I don't want to specify government, but when I say state, how church relates to the country, like to the thing as a whole. I think that's one major shift. And debate goes on within Catholic circles about whether there's in fact been a doctrinal shift there or not. But that there has been an instinctive shift in the big picture is unmistakable. I think the other thing that goes on is a shift in, I don't know, I don't have a good word for this, but tolerance for cruelty or pain. That is to say, these days, even if you are, say, a solid, strong pro-death penalty guy, like you think the death penalty is definitely moral and definitely, we need to pull it out sometimes, you probably still are not in the situation of saying, and I think we should do it by burning people.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yes, I'm both against the death penalty and burning people as a means.
But I would guess that if your interlocutor is someone who's pro-death penalty, you rarely come across people who are also pro-burning or pro, slow strangulation or pro anything that is incredibly painful and miserable.
Yeah, thus we have the baked-in language, no cruel or unusual punishment. We have the baked-in language, separation of church and state. I mean, it's all flowing out of this conversation.
And I think, and I don't have a full account of why that changed. That is, given two pools of people, perhaps both of whom in a given situation would think inflicting death is the appropriate thing to do here, that there was a shift so that the pool today would look at the pool of previous centuries and go, oh my goodness, because they're doing all kinds of what we would see as cruel things to put people to death.
Right.
That seems to me separable from the question of, should I put this person to death? And I think it is separated, right? You have people where they're just within a line of people who have thought the death penalty is good, and they still think that, but they've shifted on this thing.
Yeah.
So I think you get both things going on. You get a change in how people think of the church relating to the state. That's related to the question that, is it even conceivable that killing somebody is an appropriate response? And then you also have a change in how people even see, how should I deal with people that I'm going to punish? And you put those together, and I have more of a narrative on the one than the other. And I don't know if is it just that we're just so sensitive these days, we've all gotten very nice, or is it that we're not barbaric anymore? You're right, that'd be a wonderful conversation to have.
Or just I just think pluralism changes the equation. I mean, who was it? There was the Maypole issue that the Pilgrims dealt with. I mean, they came to make this Protestant enclave of this, perfect utopian Christian society. We're going to be a candle on a hill to show those Catholics back in Europe how it ought to be done. And then Thomas, what's his name, makes a Maypole, and that's a pagan rite. And and they end up kicking him out. I don't think they killed him. I think they expelled him from the colony, if I remember right. Anne Hutchinson, same thing. Didn't fit in well with folks who were putting a candle on a hill in the colonial days, and she gets sent out to live with the Indians. And that doesn't go so well. And so what I see as being really key is something changed coming out of the Middle Ages. And I don't think it's entirely fair for non-Catholics to get after Catholics over this, because in part I think Rome pursued power. They wanted temporal power. I mean, the investiture controversy, come on, it's not even close. Like, come to my castle at Canossa, crawl on the floor, I will subjugate the king, the emperors will serve. But prior to that, I mean, it was a Roman emperor who was like, we got nobody. There's no mayor, there's no presence in the West. Church, you want to get it? The Attila thing I referenced earlier. There's nobody to face Attila. Whoa, the church did it? Well, thank goodness somebody did it, right? And so I think this picture that a lot of times outsiders, Protestants in particular, paint of Rome being very power hungry and trying to consolidate power temporally is fair later in the game, the High Middle Ages. I don't think that's necessarily fair early in the game. It just kind of got dealt to them as all the sources of power moved east, and there's this vacuum, and Rome ends up kind of filling it. Well, now, I don't know, whose fault is that? Politics, history, whatever. So my point is, I don't bring up this question to say, oh, you guys are awful, and if my people were in charge, we never would have done that kind of stuff. Difficult times. I ask the question to say, how would it be different now? And I'll use we language here instead of you guys language, but if the Western Church, Protestant Catholic, or some future unified hypothetical version came to a place where it governed society, would we do stuff like fundamentalist Islam does? I mean, I hope not. I don't think so. Would we revert to burning people who had the wrong opinion about the Trinity? I mean, I don't think so. I hope not. But one of the things I've been wrestling with lately, from both of our perspectives, is just what's changed theologically. Is it just that society got nicer, or did something occur to us theologically about the nature of the church and the state, and the role of violence and the sword? And are we catching up with Jesus on this now, or is it just that we can't anymore?
Well, let me throw one more factor in there that I think is definitely playing heavily in whatever change there is. It's a shift into modernity, and I mean that today we have a society that professes to be secular, completely just no religious commitment, and all religious groups are kind of, from the view of the state, private clubs, so to speak. That of course you guys can get together and do your thing. They can get together, whatever. And we can fail to appreciate how bizarre that is in the history of mankind. And if you go back into antiquity, kings and religion were. I mean, I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm just talking about anywhere that religion and society were never that separate before. Anywhere, you would have. You say, the Israelites come in and they face the Canaanites. Well, the Canaanites, they're like a Canaanite country. That doesn't just name them as an ethnicity, it also names their religion in one word. And you can do that everywhere.
Which is part of why when we read the Old Testament now, it just feels so baffling and foreign as to what happened militarily. Because we're reading it through the lenses of like, what? Well, if the United States attacked Canada and that kind of stuff happened?
You not only have this is pre-New Testament thing, this is, I guess I'm just saying, this is also this is pre-modernity. And we think differently today that so the various forms of Christianity that have emerged, some of them may have been sort of precursors of modernity, but many of them just were in the uniform pre-modern mindset that society and religion are together. It's one thing. Geneva and the whole deal, right? So as we roll into modernity, I think that you don't just want to ask what happened to Christians theologically. You also want to ask what happened to society that it became possible for the first time in human history for a society to see itself as secular. That's never happened. And I think that's kind of a framework that affects how we think about church relating to society. We're in this totally new situation that we're trying to navigate. That none of our forebears had to. And so then I think we end up with some new instincts coming out of that situation. And we can ask, it would be a fun question to ask, is it okay that, do we think it's better on the whole that society now has this ability to think of itself as secular that it never had before? Or do we think that's a loss on the whole? But we can say this for sure, it's changing the way we think.
Or did secular happen because we screwed up in the 16th century? Is it a direct product of the screwy, weird stuff that Christendom, and here I am using we language, that Christendom botched over a several hundred-year period on either side of the Reformation? Because I think a strong case could be made for that. Secularism is a dialogue with the failures of Christendom. Yeah, leftism, and by leftism I don't mean like liberals. I mean, I suppose I'm kind of liberal in some ways.
Right.
But I mean leftism meaning like communism, socialism, like building a government not just around not God being at the center, but around the assumption of not God, not religion. Is this effectively something that's in dialogue with our Christian past and not an inevitable phenomenon that just happened? I think a good case could be made that.
I think it's a contingent happen. People like to run the narrative that a secular liberal society was the culmination of human history. It was the inevitable evolution of mankind. But I think what you're saying is probably true, that it was a contingent outcome of things people did over a long period. Not like there was a guy who made the decision, but over several centuries that things that could have broken a different way broke the way they broke, and now we're here.
I'm glad you were patient enough to let me get to that last question, which I know is delicate, and you just handled it marvelously. Thank you. Because I think it's a good landing place for this discussion. The things that we're talking about, to an outsider, to everything about religion, Bible, theology, all of that, might just seem like, how many angels can dance on the head of the pin? This is such a waste of time. Who cares what happens to your stupid bread when people pray prayers? I don't care. Say it's the body of Jesus. I don't care. Say it's not. You people are crazy. But the reality is that even people who do think we're nuts and think this whole thing is just complete nonsense and there's no God behind it at all, you can't get around the fact that this conversation is still important. Even if we are nuts, I don't think we are. I think there is a God behind all of this stuff. I think we worship the exact same one, you and I. But even if there's nothing behind this is still the intellectual, historical, religious, philosophical framework that every single one of us live in.
Right.
And frankly, the question about the Eucharist affects how society unfolds. Or even just how you handle your business while asking the question about the Eucharist. The question of church membership and the relationship between the church and the state and how you interpret the Bible and who should interpret the Bible.
Right.
And the question of priesthood of all believers. Priesthood of all believers sounds a whole lot like the colonial American independence French revolutionary movement.
Right.
I mean, all of these ideas about how we view ourselves and how we view our neighbors and how we view church.
Right.
These things are so interrelated, and what stinks is, what are the two things you can't talk about at parties? Everything we just talked about, religion and politics. What are the two things that if we could figure out how to talk about it and understand maybe somebody else's 500 assumptions, that could actually make everything better? Religion and politics. Religion shaping the way we conduct ourselves to reduce the power that we try to wield against each other in politics. I can see a roadmap to stuff being better. And I don't want to imagine that us eating food is like the great hope for everything, but the reason I want to have these conversations with people who are willing to just play ball like you have been is because I think there's hope in these kind of conversations. I think every time I do it, every time I've been sitting with a Catholic, I get you better. And I don't think I'm any closer to converting, but man, I like you more, I get you more. It becomes more and more impossible for me to just be like, there's several million crazy people running around who just think stupid stuff, and only I'm smart and they're dumb. I cannot hold that opinion when I sit and I listen to what you guys think and why you think it, and that's a service that you're doing to me. So, so thank you a ton for showing me that grace. Maybe
a tagline could be something like this: tolerance doesn't have to mean indifference. The fact that we're tolerant doesn't have to mean I don't care what you think. What if I care passionately what you think? And I still want to sit down and have this conversation, right? That is, can we promote the practice and the art of substantive conversation about real things that matter?
Yeah, what's interesting is, I mean, we've done this, I said an hour, we've been here for like 2+, man.
Right, yeah.
But not at one point have you made me feel like I'm your enemy.
Oh, and mutual, Thank you for that.
That's so enjoyable, because I just want to know. And understand it and be able to speak intelligently to it. And you've said dozens of things that I've never thought about. Maybe I missed it in the caps lock on comment section or something. But but because you're willing to take the time and let me pest you with questions and shoot the breeze, I've thought about stuff from your perspective that I've never considered in all my years of caring about this. And I'm I'm gushing now, but I'm just very, very thankful that you take the time. And
I've enjoyed this tremendously.
teach me
Thanks
stuff.
for the opportunity to sit down and talk through this stuff. It's my favorite thing.
It's a joy. Let's do it again sometime, my friend.
Yep.
Thank you.